Welcome back to another random snorkeling adventure. Today, we're at the Gulf Islands National Seashore. We're going to be snorkeling and freediving in 4 different environments. So what are the 4 environments? First of all, there's freshwater ponds that form in the dunes. Secondly, the Gulf, obviously, which it's a little windy and the Gulf's kind of cranky right now, so we'll see how that goes. But third, the sound side, there's a few areas that have some underwater structures that we're going to freedive and snorkel and just see what wildlife is hanging out. And then fourth, we're going to explore some of the blackwater canals that are on the island. You know the rules. It's a random snorkeling adventure. Conditions are probably not optimal. No idea what we're going to find, but hope you guys enjoy the video and I'll see you out there. Alright, so this is the first freshwater pond, but I'm actually not sure how fresh it is because if you look right there, it's the Gulf. Yeah, so the Gulf is slowly climbing over this little hill here, so I'm pretty sure this is not a freshwater pond, but it's interesting, so we're going to snorkel it anyway. I tasted the water and it's salty. There's some cool fish in here, but the visibility is really bad, so this is probably not going to go too well. I think the majority of the cool things we see will be on the sound side, but I'll give it a try. While I'd hoped this would be a freshwater pond or marsh, it had clearly become a straight up salt marsh. It was shallow, hot, and as for the visibility, well, there wasn't any. Nevertheless, I had seen some small fish darting about the shallows, but it was so murky I couldn't even plan out a shot that would let me get close enough to them. I ended up going over to the far shore to film some of the rushes growing up along the edge of the tiny marsh. Despite the poor conditions for me and my camera, this was still a neat little slice of aquatic habitat nestled right beside the Gulf. I did see a few salt-tolerant snails hanging out on some fallen plants, but that was it. A little disappointed, but still determined, I crossed the tiny beach and headed out a ways into the Gulf. As previously mentioned, the Gulf was cranky today. It was a yellow and purple flag kind of day at the beach. And even though the shape of the beach had created a relatively calm section of shoreline, the visibility was still soupy. Another bummer, especially as it had apparently been crystal clear 2 days ago, but alas, we were not in town at that time. 2 strikes in a row was a rough start, but there were still 2 more environments to explore. That did not work very well, but sometimes that's the way it goes on random snorkeling adventures. Now we're headed to the sound side. There's a lot of scuba divers out there today, so hopefully that's a good sign that there's some neat stuff to see. Get our fins on, get in, see what we can find. The boys came through, so I didn't have to dive the sound alone. So Luke and Ben are with me today. They're in a few of my other videos and will likely be in more in the future. Also, they grew up together. I think that's why they're hitting each other with t-shirts. Kind of rough out there, but we'll see. As soon as my head broke the surface, I was actually surprised to find the visibility was not too bad here. As I dove down a little ways, I was immediately surrounded by thousands of small schooling fish. Despite there being loads of these little guys, I never got a good enough look to figure out what species they were. Typically, they're just generally referred to as bait fish, which sounds almost condescending, but these massive groups of fish are an important food source for other creatures in this marine environment, so it's actually pretty fitting. The speed at which these little guys could move was pretty crazy. It was kind of like swimming through an underwater tornado. I followed them over to a small jetty that stretched a short ways offshore. I could tell there was an impressive amount of life hiding out between the rocks of the jetty. First off, I spotted this gray triggerfish. He didn't stick around, but fun fact about these guys is they can change color on demand in breeding season. There was some decent sized snapper hanging out as well. This was probably the biggest one I saw, and I believe is a gray snapper. He might not look that big on camera, but he was probably about a foot long. I then spotted this fish that looked like it was missing a chunk from its head. Unfortunately, I didn't get a great look before he disappeared in a crack, but I was determined to keep an eye out in case I was able to spot him again. Out of nowhere, the winds and current seemed to shift. All the seagrass and other detritus that had been stuck close to shore was now flowing freely in the water column and smacking me in the face. The viz was still good, but so much just came sailing by, including this jellyfish. It was kind of a close call. Despite the swirling debris, the fish were still abundant, and I came across a big group of snappers and sergeant majors, which are the black striped fish. It's amazing how just a little bit of structure attracts so much life in these coastal environments. This crab was doing a great job pretending to be a rock, but I still spotted him. I think it's just a blue crab, but it was a little hard to tell since he was partially buried. But then little flashes of color and movement on the rocks themselves caught my eye. These long, bug-eyed fish were darting all around the miniature forests on the surface of the rocks. These are gobies. I think they're clown gobies, but they were moving so fast and I was getting tossed around by the current. It was neat to see them in a true saltwater context. If you've seen my other videos, you know I've encountered gobies in some of the saltier springs in inland Florida before. There were a lot of little holes formed in the rocks, and I could see quite a few little goby heads sticking out. It was pretty much just a big goby hotel down here. I saw a few nice shells that were inhabited by some hermit crabs. But one of the shells led me to this colorful little fellow. This is a juvenile Beau Gregory, which is a species of damselfish. As this fish grows older, its colors will fade slightly, but for now, it's adding a remarkable splash of color to this underwater world. And then, finally, once again, I found the fish with the missing dome. This is some kind of grunt, but I really have no idea what happened to him. I'm not sure if it was an encounter with a predator or with some fishing gear, but either way, this is a gnarly sight. But despite this massive wound, he appeared to keep on just doing what fish do. He seemed alright. It's kind of sad to see, but also a pretty remarkable display of resilience. There's no doubt about it. We then decided to head to deeper waters, so Ben, Luke, and I left the jetty behind and headed off into the green. If you remember the jellyfish from earlier, well, there were loads of them out here. We had essentially entered jellyfish fields, as Atlantic sea nettles were drifting all about like ghostly, stingy landmines. The rhythmic pulsing of the jellyfish's body seemed to harmonize with the ebb and flow of the waves. In addition to the sea nettles were hundreds of comb jellies floating just beneath the surface. These guys thankfully don't sting, and it was awesome to float beside them and watch the light filter through their translucent bodies. The sea nettles had some impressively long tentacles, and at this point, a few stray free-floating tentacles had already made contact with what little parts of my skin were exposed. So while swimming with these jellies was awesome, it came at a bit of a price. I was definitely glad I had my wetsuit top, even if I was a bit warm. Honestly, respect to my boys SpongeBob and Patrick and their deep appreciation for the wild beauty of the jellyfish fields. Avoiding the reaching tentacles as best as I could, I grabbed a breath and free dove down about 20 feet to the bottom. It was real green down there, but there was a bit of structure, so I kept my eyes out for signs of life. came across this big stingray resting in a sandy patch between the rocks. Not much farther off, I came across a group of interesting fish gathered around a jellyfish. They were systematically dismembering the unlucky jelly and taking bites out of it. The camouflage-colored fish is a plainhead filefish. These fish are so bizarre looking, and I was pretty excited as this was my first time seeing one in the wild. By this point, I was pretty beat from battling the currents while diving and wielding the camera, so I headed back up to the surface and to shore. But we still had one last environment to snorkel, the freshwater canals. I got in off the bridge to not erode the bank any, since this isn't a usual swimming area. I bent down and took a sip of the water, and it was indeed fresh. When I stuck my head under, I could see about a foot in front of me, but the water was super tannic and dark red. While it wasn't ideal for me or my camera, that doesn't take away from the importance of this aquatic habitat. Most of the coastal dune environments in Florida are developed, but for the few protected dune ecosystems that are still wild, freshwater sources like this are super important. But I wasn't going to find much under here, so this random snorkeling adventure had to come to an end. I wanted to take a break in the video to say thank you for 50,000 subscribers. I love making these underwater videos, and obviously I wouldn't have reached this milestone without you, so thank you. Got a lot of really cool videos planned for the rest of the year, including Brain Eating Amoebas Part 2, releasing Halloween night, and then also to close out 2025, a short documentary about how I took one of the most unique manatee photos ever. So once again, thank you for 50,000 subscribers. Whoop. Well, only 1 out of 4 ecosystems really ended up being worth it, but sometimes that's the way it goes. It was definitely suboptimal conditions for the Gulf Coast. It gets way better than that. But we're not just fair weather snorkelers. We take what we can get whenever we can get it. So still saw a lot of cool fish, stingray, jellyfish. Jellyfish were a little painful, but not too bad. Still worth diving in. Still cool things to find. That's always the case. Also, snorkeling just makes me happy. So before we got in, even though it wasn't the best conditions, I hadn't seen any fish, jellies, or stingray. And after I got in, I had seen all those things. If this was my full-time job, I could prioritize peak conditions, but right now I kind of got to take what I can get when I can get it. But who knows? Maybe one day. Obviously, with a saltwater dive, got in the day with good gear rinse, so all this stuff does not rust. Ideally, normally you want to actually soak your camera in a bath, but sometimes I've found it still works well if you just make sure you hit all the buttons while rinsing it really good with fresh water. You have to be pretty thorough though. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.